Good morning. I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day. Now, I am sure you either already know this or you can tell from my stupid hipster haircut that I love vinyl. And in this week's video, I thought I would talk a little bit about the differences between collecting vinyl and streaming platforms and how I personally go about trying to get the best from both worlds. And hopefully I'll be able to offer up some advice to people who are maybe starting off collecting records and are unsure about how to determine what records they should or shouldn't buy and how to judge that, because records are really expensive. And I remember what it was like when I was starting doing this, having lists and lists and lists of all of the records that I wanted to buy, but it would cost me, thousands of pounds to get them all. So I'll talk a bit about how I personally determine whether or not a record is worth actually purchasing for me. And a quick disclaimer, I am not going to be talking about anything to do with the difference in audio quality between vinyl and streaming. That's a can of worms I cannot be bothered to open. And I'm also not saying that there's anything wrong with other mediums of listening to music, like CDs, it's just that vinyl and streaming are the two that I personally am most familiar with, so that's what I'm going to talk about. Right, so I've been collecting records for about 6 years now, I'd say. My collection is kind of over there in the corner, and I love it. And I think if you're a music lover too, I would massively recommend that you start your own record collection. However, when it comes to consuming music in 2019, it is naive to think that you can get by on records alone. And why would you? I mean, Spotify and other streaming platforms are just brilliant. We all have this practically limitless supply of new and undiscovered music just at our fingertips, and that's an amazing thing. Like, it truly, truly is. And I know that there is an argument to be made about the problems with streaming platforms and, the pitiful amount that artists are paid per stream and the death of the album format or any of that nonsense. While streaming platforms do have their faults, as do most things, they are fundamentally brilliant. And I think it's amazing that we all just have access to all of this music. I think it's great. And while I'm sure some people might want to take sides for a specific format, I genuinely don't think that the two devalue each other at all. Quite to the contrary, in fact. I think that the differences between the two platforms just highlight and emphasize the positives of each different way that you can listen to music. Streaming is accessible anywhere. The library is endless. You're almost guaranteed to find a new artist that you really, really like and engage with if you're experimenting with playlists. But vinyl is beautiful. Vinyl lasts, and I still maintain that there are fewer things more pleasurable and satisfying than holding one of your favorite artists' records in your hand, looking at the artwork in full size, full color, and just being able to hold this piece of music. But let's be realistic about this. Vinyl is expensive, cumbersome, and inconvenient. I mean, have you ever tried moving house with a record collection? It fucking sucks. And at the moment, we're kind of at the peak of the vinyl resurgence. And what I would say, if you're sort of considering it, is two things. Number one, it really doesn't matter what format you listen to your music in. It really doesn't. There are advantages and disadvantages to both formats. And two, sometimes, and this might sound a bit weird saying this, it's not worth it. Sometimes it's just not necessarily worth spending the extra money that you'll have to spend to get a record. And that is pretty much what I want to talk about today, how to balance your music listening between the two formats and how to work out what records are really worth buying for you and what will become your personal collection. And don't get me wrong, if I had unlimited money, unlimited space, and knew that I could always afford removal companies whenever I needed to move house, I would buy way more vinyl. I wouldn't even think about it. Every album I wanted, I would just get on vinyl. But I don't. So I have to think carefully about what records I actually want and what I feel is worth spending that money on. And I mean, there are records in my Amazon shopping basket that have been there for literally years. I think there's a Damien Jurado record there that I added to my shopping basket when I was in college in Stroud. So that was, how many years ago was that? 5 years ago. I've been watching the price on that fluctuate for 5 years, and it went out of stock, I think, in late 2016, but it's back now. Yeah, there are lots of things that are in my Amazon shopping basket that when I'm in certain financial situations, I'm like, you know what, now is the time that it's worth spending that money on that record, and I'm going to do it. But sometimes things will just stay there forever, and then a few of them have just gone completely out of stock, and I think they're completely sold out, so I have to go to Discogs if I want it. But the fact that I waited so long to get something is kind of proof that it wasn't that important to me anyway. But I'm digressing. I have to be more thoughtful about what records I buy. And you know how people say that limitations enhance creativity? It's kind of the same with record collecting. Because I don't have an unlimited supply of money, I can't just get everything that I want. It means that I'm particular about what I choose, and that means I'm curating a collection of music that's special and unique and interesting and sort of tells my story. And every spine that I look at, I know that there's a certain thing or a certain sentimentality attached to just that record. And it's like, I don't know, a fine wine cellar, but of expensive polyvinyl chloride. So yeah, being more selective with your purchases will make them more valuable to you further down the line. And this is where we get into, I suppose, the differences between vinyl and streaming. And I think that fundamentally it comes down to just two very different ways of consuming music. You know, you've got a sort of transient, passive, temporary, constantly changing and evolving way of listening to music, streaming, versus a permanent, cemented, repeatable set of memories and experiences that you literally own. One isn't better than the other. They're both completely different activities. You know, when I sit down with my friends to play a new record that one of us bought together in my living room and, you know, absorb it all, that's just incomparable to pre-drinks on a Friday night where we've got the truly deeply house playlist on in the background. So let's think about buying a record, right? You're on a budget, you're in a shop, and you look at something, and what I always do when I'm casually browsing the record sections of shops, when I see something, I think to myself, will I still be listening to this in 5 years' time? Normally the answer I give to that is yes, but I think that's much more to do with me trying to rationalize spending more money than I have. But it is something that I'd say you should consider, because when you buy a record, you're kind of investing in a memory or an experience. Oh Christ, this sounds so wanky, doesn't it? Like, this is the wankiest video I've ever made. I'm so sorry. Bear with me on this. A record is something that unless you sell it or chuck it away, you will always have it, and you'll always be able to, provided you've got a working turntable, put it on, play it, and revisit the era of your life that you were in when you first bought it or when you first heard that music, you know? It's like a free ticket to be a tourist in your own nostalgia. Streaming, on the other hand, is a completely different thing, but no less valuable. Streaming is how you work out what music is going to have that effect on you. Streaming is how you discover new artists. Streaming is how you evaluate how much repeated playing time a song or an album has. I mean, we all have those albums that we absolutely loved, but only for about 2 weeks, and then we got really, really bored of them quickly. Streaming means that you don't have to pay £25 for an album without knowing that in a week you're never going to listen to it again. You have a limitless supply of music that you can listen to whenever and wherever you want. And most of the time, streaming is what will lead me to buy vinyl in the first place. I mean, the number of times that I've been listening to music in an environment where there'll be no way of me playing it on a record player. The experiences that I'm having while I'm streaming music will then lead on to me in a month's time hearing that track again and being taken back to that experience. And that's when I decide, yeah, I'm going to buy that record. But the other thing I think streaming is so good for is that music doesn't have to always be this big, profound thing. Sometimes you just want to absorb music casually, and that's where streaming just comes into its own, and you can just walk into town for hours and hours with a playlist going on. And the thing is I discover about 10 times more new artists, and not just new artists that I now know their name, new artists that I follow and I really, really like. I discover so much more of that now that I have Spotify. It's wonderful. You don't have to be, you know, sat down really seriously thinking about the music every single time you do it. It's an amazing thing to be able to do that. And I want to be surprised. I want to hear new things and discover new favorite artists and curate a soundtrack to that month of my life that isn't mostly made up of recycled music that I've been listening to for the last 3 years. And yes, sometimes you can do that with records. Like, I remember talking a lot about buying mystery records a year or two ago. There was a shop that occasionally you could find like a double 180 gram 12-inch LP for £4 or £5, and then I would just buy it and see if I liked it or not when I got home. But the thing is that shop closed down, and now I have to go to HMV, and the whole mystery record thing becomes a lot more intimidating and risky when instead of spending £3 to £5, you're spending £20 to £30 every time. I still do that from time to time, but much less frequently, and that's the thing. Spotify just gets rid of that risk, you know. Doesn't matter if I don't like the music. I haven't spent a load of money on it. It's just my subscription. Right, so how do you choose what to buy on vinyl? I'm so sorry. This has been such a rambly, non-linear video. I now reserve vinyl purchases for albums I know I'll still be listening to in at least a couple of years' time. It has to be music that I genuinely really, really love, or music that I at least have a strong enough emotional attachment to that I know I'm going to want to revisit it at some point. Take this record, for example. Bombay Bicycle Club's So Long, See You Tomorrow. Fantastic album. But I was listening to this in the winter before my first year of university, and now all it takes are the first couple of notes from the first track on this, and I am taken right back to that era. And I genuinely find it really difficult listening to this sometimes. If it comes on shuffle on my phone, I just skip the music because I don't want to be taken back there. It makes me like too nostalgic and a bit sad sometimes. But I like knowing that I have this. I have this little physical portal into my past that's not going to be deleted if my hard drive gets corrupted. And that is the kind of value I would recommend you look for when searching for what records to buy. So use streaming to uncover and realize the music that means the most to you, and then buy it on vinyl to cement its value if you feel it's worth it. There we go, some meaningless advice from a in your computer. Honestly though, do whatever you want. I'm just rambling really, and I'm in no way suggesting that you shouldn't ever buy a record just because you like the music or you think the cover art is cool or any of that stuff, you know. I still do that quite frequently. I mean, I bought this the other day, which is hardly a serious album, but it's also bloody brilliant because Blink-182 are great. It's just nice to be able to look at your record collection, read the spines, and know that each one of those albums has its own sentimentality and its own memories and periods of your life associated with it. It's its own thing, you know. Instead of just having lots and lots of records, very few of which mean much to you and you never really listen to anyway and are just inconvenient when you're trying to haul them from one house to the next, you know. But yeah, I don't know. That's all I'm going to say on this. This video is going to be way too long and way too stupid and pointless. I'm really sorry if you've had to endure all of this. But speaking of vinyl, my debut EP, Her, is getting its vinyl released. You'll be pleased to know, a couple of you hopefully, that the order has now gone through. I'll be getting the test pressings in a couple of weeks, and in a couple of weeks I'll also be setting up an online shop. So if you missed out on the Kickstarter pledges, there will still be the opportunity to both pre-order and then when they're fully released, buy the records if you want them. So that's all very good news. The colour of the record is going to be blue. Democracy demanded it, so I had to oblige. And yeah, that's everything. Be sure to follow me on Instagram if you want. I occasionally post photos of the records I'm listening to and other stuff. So thank you so much for watching. I really do hope that you've enjoyed this and hopefully got something out of it. Let me know what you think in the comments. You know, you might massively disagree with everything I've said, and that's fine. I'd love to know all of your thoughts and opinions down there, so please do let me know. Anyway, have an absolutely fantastic day, and I will see you very soon.